How do you think we can address the ecological, environmental, energy, food, water and climate crisis that the world is currently facing?
Oh wow, that's huge. I think we should educate ourselves in terms of what is actually happening in the world and how we as the people have an impact on it, and how to actually direct or change that direct impact that we have to something positive.
This crisis, this environmental, climate and every other kind of crisis that the world is facing is not imposed upon us. This is not like a God-made crisis. This is a man-made crisis.
We only start to recognize the importance of things, especially things that have to do with nature, and we only start to recognize how big and important their role is when they start to fade away.
We need to treat our non-renewable resources as non-renewable resources and not wasting water as if it's water, you know, as the old saying goes.
We are facing a water crisis in many parts of the world, not everywhere, but certainly in much of Africa.
If we look at resources, I don't think water availability is the crisis. When we acknowledge that we lose 37% of our urban water supply through leaks, that's not a crisis of availability, that's simply a crisis of management. When I say that I don't think there is a crisis, I have to be careful. When we see what the drought's doing locally here, if you travel up to Msinga, to Gela Ferry, and you see that there are no cattle anymore, clearly for those people it is a crisis.
We should be learning how to actually combat the ecological problems that we're facing, instead of having all kinds of meetings around the world, and we have world leaders meeting, and we should actually be meeting with the people and say, okay, this is what's happening in your area right now, and we'd like you guys to be part of this project, because it is for the people at the end of the day. We are part of the planet, we are living on this planet, and we should also have some sort of role that we're playing.
We need to make it possible for people to see the importance of nature and, you know, the nature systems. Everything has its place in our lives, and everything has its place in the ecosystem. Then maybe we can start to treasure nature more and ecosystems more.
Ecosystems, they are forever interacting, and all ecosystems have a carrying capacity. So we have to understand our ecosystems better to ensure that we understand what those carrying capacities are, and to be able to allow them to operate optimally.
I think we've got to accept that the ecosystem is severely disturbed by anthropogenic forces. We've had a big impact on the ecosystem, but it really is a case of saying, well, what's the ecosystem we have now, and how can we make that function better? I don't think in many heavily populated areas of the world it's a useful thing to think about going back to what it was before. In many cases we don't even know what that looks like.
We have been tending to work in silos, the hydrologist in hydrology, the agriculturalist in agriculture, the energy person in energy. We have to interlink all of these. It's one big system. The interrelationship has to be understood, the interlinkages have to be made between, as you say, food, energy, water, and the atmosphere.
I think of Lesotho and how we get our water, our fresh water from Lesotho, and I think of the mountains in Lesotho, and I think that's one of the things that makes it possible for them to have fresh running water. And so recognizing the importance of everything, and the connectedness of everything.
Actually, I think it's about feeling connection, because if we can feel it, then we want to do something about it. But if we can't feel it, well, then there's nothing to move forward on.
Of course, we can all learn to live more lightly on our planet, and that would be a good thing. But I think that we won't get there unless we enable people to believe that it is in their interest to do so. And when people are very poor and very deprived and struggling for a living, it's very hard for them to think about those bigger issues of the planet.
The biggest catastrophe, I may call it, that all humanity I feel is facing right now is the inability to have compassion amongst one another. Just that inability to think beyond just yourself and your immediate family.
We need to live together. We need to understand one another. Less greed, more love. I think I sound like Bob Marley. But I think, we need to be not tolerant, accepting of one another, and understanding that we are different, but we share this beautiful planet, and it could be a great place for everyone if we just understand that we don't have to be the same to live together.
The starting point is our unity as human beings, but also our unity as animals and our unity with the natural world. So we have to first realize that we are part of nature. That's something that we've not fully understood, and that's something that Marx himself emphasized actually in his famous work Das Kapital. How we as humans are extensions of nature, and as we try to transform nature, we're transforming ourselves.
I think if you start to follow the ethics of permaculture, essentially, which is about caring for people, caring for the earth, and looking at ways of returning the surplus. What do we do with the surplus? Then you really start to look at what is design? What are we trying to achieve as humans? Is this how it should be? Is this how it could be? And how were our forefathers living? How were other indigenous people living before we were doing this? And is there scope for a more balanced approach to life?
Within the forest, the trees exchange nutrients as and when needed through the mycorrhizal and mycelial networks in the soil. Why don't we emulate that as a society rather than create this hierarchy where social grants or minimum wages or minimum basic guaranteed incomes are dished out piecemeal only to sustain the hierarchy? Collapse that thing, create a web. People can uphold each other. Yes, that's the concept of Ubuntuism.
And actually we can create new kinds of infrastructure that is less dependent on the state and so on. That is really much more amenable to deployment by citizens themselves in their own capital and their own capacity. And I think that's a wave that you might see in Africa evolve very rapidly, where everything is decentralized.
Africa still needs to develop, and so we need to create jobs, we need to build infrastructure, but how can we do that in a more sustainable way? We can no longer follow the development trajectory that the West has followed, that has led to so much emissions and so on. So what is the opportunity that we can allow us to do things differently?
We've got to invert our thinking. We've got to stop thinking that we're going to have some sort of top-down, centralized solution, and we've got to start each one of us, every human being, playing a part in the transformation of the earth, our communities. And that's why we see so many broken communities. It's because everyone's waiting for salvation and they're just repeating the same destructive patterns. So if you're going to get there, you want change in the long run, the future is decentralized, grassroots, upward movement.
Technical innovation will only take us so far. I think social innovation in the future will be the absolute key, how we learn to live together better.
We need to be out there and helping people and working together with them to find solutions that work and at least work on the problem, not just look away.
Days for dialogue are long gone. Days for action are there. There are many wonderful organizations with incredible results that should just be scaled up and supported to scale.
They're not impossible, mythical things where you have to try to imagine what they are. They're actually there in front of us. And then the imagination is of how we actually make them work for ourselves.
We all have to do our share. My individual share and your individual share may seem to be minuscule, but if 7 billion people start looking after the planet will look after us.